Michael Lombard, by the way, I want you to kind of hear about this. This is so up your alley. What they do is that the roller derby girls, they actually all get on their rollerblades, put on red, get big giant Nerf bats, and all of these people just take off running through the streets of New Orleans, and the roller derby girls become the bulls who then pursue you and whack you with those Nerf bats as you run away from them. That's a challenge that you haven't quite yet gone through, given a man who's been through so many challenges. And good morning, Michael Lombard. How are you?
Good morning, gentlemen. It's good to be here. Glad to be here. I enjoyed listening to a lot of the last segment. I can tell you that running of the roller derby girls does sound that has. I mean, you have my interest peaked.
Yeah, and I'm picking up my registration packet today, so I'm stoked about that. We're going to be doing that, and I got to be really careful though, because I'm supposed to give somebody away at a wedding on Sunday, so I have to be really, really careful not to sprain my ankle and not to kind of disappoint that young lady as well. Dre's got one more thing for you, Mike.
You just got to watch out for some of the guys out there. They might just want to be there for being beat by a bat with the girl.
I know. We tend to push those guys to the concrete almost immediately. Come on, get out of here, man. By the way, our good friend Michael works full-time for a truck parking club, part-time as a fitness and nutrition coach, and he competes in Ironman Triathlons, raising money and awareness about the driver health epidemic. Let's start there. We'll bounce all over the place, Michael. We'll talk about your background and why you are so connected to trucking in a moment. But let's talk initially about what you perceive as the driver health epidemic, because we here at Radio Nemo, who actually introduced Highway to Health 15 years ago on our other platform, are deeply invested in this as well. Please unpack that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of a name that I mean, I'm sure it's been said before, and I know that people kind of describe the overall health issues in this country as an epidemic, but I call it the driver health epidemic because of the numbers and what the numbers show, and so which are egregious. So, and the numbers I'm talking about is the fact that truck drivers, the job itself will remove 16 years off your life, which moves the average life expectancy to 61. And then you have the rates of chronic disease that are out there. So truck driver, over 2/3 of just truck drivers are obese, which is double that of the entire working class population. So that's we gotta quantify that. That is a macro number. So just truck drivers are double every other job and profession of all working class Americans in it. And when you have a number as egregious as that, what that tells me is that this isn't an individual issue. We can't put this blame fully on the individual. We have to realize that this is systemic and environmental. Like it's not just, the ones and twos here and they just need a little bit of guidance. When something is that big on those number scales, and then the same thing with almost every other chronic disease. Every other chronic disease, from diabetes, hypertension, neurological disorders, anything that falls under, chronic disease is substantially greater than the rest of just the working class population. So just one profession, which tells you it's environmental, it's systemic. This isn't an individual issue. And so when you have numbers that big, it begins to raise some alarms to where this isn't a single diagnostic sort of issue. Like we need to change the entire culture around health and fitness within the industry, because it's the environment overall. Do people have personal responsibility? Yes, completely agree. But they're not in an environment that is enabling and supportive of that type of lifestyle and of prioritizing health and fitness. And if you're not in that environment, it's the same thing with when somebody who has an addiction, whether it be because food is something people can be addicted to. If you are addicted to alcohol or drugs and you go into a rehabilitation program, when you get out, you don't put that person in the same environment they came from. You don't send them to go live. They don't live next door to a bar. They don't go live with, you don't put them back in that environment, because it doesn't enable the environment they're trying to escape from. And it's kind of, I'm not saying that drivers are addicts. I'm just kind of like putting it into context, is that we are products of our environment. Like we are who we surround ourselves with. And if our environment is not supporting and enabling it, then we have an epidemic, because these numbers are absolutely egregious and they're not okay.
No, and by the way, I'm really, really appreciative of that because look, I mean, there's a lot of people and they were raised this way. And by the way, you come from a very hard scramble. A lot of really hardworking dudes are in your lineage. People who built things, me and my Paul with a hammer and a saw sort of reality. And it becomes very easy to say what has happened here is a failure of character. But if in fact, well, I'll make up an imaginary situation. If there is an assembly line and all of the workers have at least lost one finger, that is not a failure of character to pay attention. Something's wrong with the assembly line. At that point, somebody has to say, wait a minute, we've got to make some adjustments here too. And what you're talking about is not just a shift in the way these men and women, although some of the women have better outcomes, these men and women need to make some changes in their life, but the atmosphere and the environment in which they are placed needs to work with them to give them the ability to succeed in making these changes. It is nothing more awful than somebody making a commitment to health and excellence and having genuine obstacles in regards to the food they have access to. And the other thing is people say, well, get your own good food. You're like, dude, if you're working 14 hours a day, when exactly is that supposed to happen when you're exhausted at the end? And so you're talking about not just a change in the individual behavior of the men and women behind the wheel. You're talking about getting down and dirty and working with the industry to say, how can you give these people the tools to succeed in health? I got that right?
Exactly. Well said.
So I want to talk about you because you and I both are people, along with Foam Master Dre, who have put our money where our mouth is. I used to weigh 267 pounds. I now weigh 195. You have your own personal fitness story, do you not?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. No, I've got it's part of the story I've written. I've had to have, it's crazy. I've tried to come to terms with it because I had it and lost it, like when it came to it, because I did serve in the Marine Corps. So I was in incredibly good shape. And then all of a sudden I wasn't. So it's like I've had to go through that downward spiral before too. So it's like and what I hate is and even today I look back and sometimes when I talk to some other athletes, I kick myself in the pants over having lost it in the first place. And I have a lot of friends who then they validate it and saying, if you didn't walk this walk, you really wouldn't be where you are right now. You had to kind of walk through this. But I do have.
I lost him. Phone Master Dre, can we get Michael back on? I've lost him, buddy. I need to get him back on here. We're going to hold on for a second while we get Michael Lombard back on, by the way. Just a quick reminder, he is a descendant of one of America's oldest motor carriers, Lombard Brothers. And that started as 8 horses and 2 carriages and eventually one of the largest motor carriers in the Northeast. We'll be talking about that in more detail here on Road Gang Radio. A quick reminder, too, you can jump into the conversation at 615-292-6366. As soon as we get Michael back on the phone, we will get ourselves moving in that direction as well. Really quickly, by the way, I want to go back to the chat here quickly and say that our good friend Trucker Bosun just said that I have 2 degrees of separation. I worked with Bill Paxton's brother in Colorado in '93, and he was in Apollo 13 with Kevin Bacon. Well said, my friend. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. And don't forget, a little bit later on in the show, after we get Michael back on the air, we're going to be talking with Jason and Sean Mendelson. They, of course, will be talking about the Peanuts soundtrack. You can find them, by the way, over on Facebook and Instagram and MendelsonProductions.com. I know a lot of people are looking forward to that conversation. I am as well. And even though we can't play the Vince Guaraldi music here quite just yet, because we don't have all the rights figured out here on our platform, lots of stuff getting figured out today, as you probably found out from our good friend Robert Braswell. He actually was clearer than he's ever been because we got the field tap operating really, really well over there. We're getting a whole bunch of stuff together, but we will be talking to them about the music in short order. That Vince Guaraldi soundtrack that often powered the soundtrack of our lives. A lot of people grew up with that, and Lindsay actually cut a really beautiful video as well, kind of making that happen here over there. And then the phone lines will reopen in the last half hour at 615-292-6366. As I said, we're going to get Michael Lombard back on here. I do want to say a couple of things about what he's talking about before we get back to Michael, and it's a pleasure to actually have him on. I want to make mention of the fact that I actually got up to 267 pounds. I got up there, and it was brutal. Because I will tell you this, and this is full disclosure about what that feels like. Many of you know it. The thing that finally woke me up to the reality of it was actually sitting on the toilet. Let that land for a second, guys. Sitting on the toilet is what did it to me. Straight up. I was so physically uncomfortable being there that I said, I've got to make a change. And then I actually went onto social media, and I saw a picture of myself with a good friend, and I said, what is my older brother, who's 6'7" both ways, doing with my good friend? And then I realized I had gotten so wide, and I wasn't as tall as him, so I didn't have the kind of presence, that I actually mistook him for me. And the combination of the physical discomfort and the combination of that and seeing that picture and not recognizing myself in that picture is what eventually gave me the impetus to make that commitment. And I will tell you right now, it started very, very slow. And one of the other things that Michael said when he was on the phone with me just now that made such a difference is the fact that he and I both had the same experience. I played sports in high school. I really enjoyed them. I stayed in shape more or less in college. And then I got heavy. And then I went through an entire summer where I got it all back. I lost it again. I lost it in my mid-40s. It fell away from me. And I will tell you, one of the hardest things for many of you guys who have gotten back in shape only to lose it later on is to find yourself in a situation where you've got to do it all over again. And you want back what you've had. And you've got to kind of focus on that. And it creates real problems for you. I won't lie to you guys. It creates real problems. You've got to then somehow bring yourself to a place where you know what it took to get there in the first place. And it just kills you inside that you have to make your way through it. It just makes a terrible difference in your life when you suddenly realize, oh my God, I've got to do this all over again. I've got to rev myself up and make this happen. And that absolutely creates amazing problems. By the way, my good friend Trucker Boson wrote, doing good, Jimmy, just roasting down here in Houston. I can imagine what the heat is like too. But the biggest difference that made for me was the fact that I told myself, speaking of heat, that I was never going to go through that again. That was the biggest thing. And I ended up putting myself back in the same position. I ended up putting myself back in the same position where I found myself once again having to walk in the heat of the New Orleans summer in a desperate attempt to lose the weight that I had gained. And by the way, there's no jump starting it. I mean, there is a time, we all know this, when we're 25, 26, 27 years old, that we can just go back out there and in 1 month's time, in the blink of an eye, it happens for us, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? In the blink of an eye, snap, and we are back to the weight we wanted to be in. I mean, we know people when we were 25, between 25 and 35, where we could just, drink a whole lot of water, get a good night's sleep, eat a whole lot less bread, and 1 month later, we were back into fighting shape. Well, that's not the truth of what happened. When you get to be 45, 50 years old, 55, and you decide to make a commitment again to that health, that weight comes off incrementally and brutally. And if it doesn't come off that way, it's not going to stay off that way. And that really kind of makes the difference. So, like I said, Phone Master Dre is kind of making an effort out there to get our good friend Michael Lombard back on the phone here on Road Gang Radio. Guys, I would tell you to give us a call, but we seem to be having a problem with our phone lines for a minute. So I'm just going to keep on kind of chatting and talking you up. It's just one of those things. We're going to get Michael Lombard back on here. Dre is hard at work at it. How you doing, man? What's going on over there? You good to go? We got to get...
What's up?
Hey, Michael, good to have you back on. Sorry about that, brother. I was having to tap dance my ass off. I'm glad to have you back.
I jumped back in. Man, it was great to hear your testimony. And you're right. I'll tell you what, one of the hardest things is the idea of starting over. And so like when it goes into my testimony, again, I was working long hours in a warehouse. I was, drove a forklift a lot. I was doing a lot of inventory control. And there's always comes a pivotal moment. And you and I had similar ones. Mine is a little bit more, it was a little bit tougher in November of 2018. A good friend of mine, Matt Brown, he passed away suddenly. in November of 2018, and it totally threw me for a curveball. And I'd say that was sort of like the rock bottom. And at that moment, I'll never forget the day I had the same. It wasn't on the toilet, but I was in the bathroom, and I had stepped on the scale, and I saw 278. Which given weight, like, so that means, and I'm 5'11" for context, so 278, and that, you figure I'm probably floating anywhere up and down 5 pounds from that. And I look in the mirror and I look at my hands, and I think about who I was, and I was 28 years old at the time, and I look at my hands and I think about who I was at 20, 21, and I was in disbelief. And the first thing and I was at a kind of a crossroads where I could have either stayed in that place and considered myself a victim or what have you. But instead I said, if I could talk to Matt Brown again, my friend, if I could talk to him right now, if I could pick up the phone and talk to him, what would he want me to do? And really that's when I started turning things around. So it wasn't, a lot of people think you got to wait till January. I have this phrase I like to say, diet starts Monday. A lot of people think you need to put things off. I started in the middle of November in 2018 where I turned it around. And when it comes to keeping it off, and this is what I preach a lot to drivers and to people who I coach, is I started with small, attainable lifestyle habits, because as you said, like, you don't want to fall into a position to where you have to start over. Although this is why I always recommend David Goggins' first book. And if you don't know who David Goggins is, he's a Navy SEAL, he's an ultra marathon runner. He's the only person he had to go through Hell Week at Navy SEAL training 3 times because he dropped out of BUD/S because of illness and injury twice, and he had to go through Navy SEAL's Hell Week 3 times. So imagine having to start that over, do exactly what you did, do some of the hardest training on the planet, and you've got to go back to day 1, week 1 of it, because of something that really you couldn't prevent, especially the illness side of it, like something that you push through, like you've already completed it. So this idea of starting over is really a mindset, but these small sustainable lifestyle habits. And so what I did, so I started getting in regular movement. I joined a gym, and I made it, and you have to clear the path of least resistance. I joined a CrossFit gym that was to and from the warehouse I worked in. And so on the way home, I had no choice but to pass it. I had no other option. From there, a coach built a relationship with me. And I know you guys were talking beforehand a lot about community, and that's a lot of stuff I like to talk about. That coach started to build a relationship with me, and he started asking about food. So I started grocery shopping more. I'm trying to, kind of condense things for the sake of time. And then from there, so from grocery shopping more and starting to take accountability, after, I got married in 2019, by the time I got to my wedding, I had, lost, almost 40 of those pounds, because I wasn't tracking anything. I wasn't counting calories, wasn't doing anything. I started to move. I changed what I was eating during the week. With that, because I was focused and moving more on weekends, I ended up drinking a little bit less alcohol. And then going into 2020, so shortly after we get married, my wife and I kind of come to a crossroads, and this is where, and granted, I've kind of been in the industry since I started in the warehouse in 2017, but, in 2019, my wife and I made this decision. I was at kind of a crossroads of thinking, where am I going to go in life? We're going to move to Texas. We moved to Central Texas. I've called myself Lombard Trucking on the internet since I made a Twitter account in 2010, because I grew up with my grandfather. I grew up, in Connecticut, where Lombard Brothers Incorporated was headquartered. I'm told all the time that if I moved back to Waterbury, and my name was on the ballot, I could probably run for mayor, because that's how known the name is. It's a part of Waterbury's history, that company. And so I want to fulfill that legacy, even though my grandfather said, don't do it. Ever since the Motor Carrier Act in 1980, it's changed. It's not, I'm telling you, and that's a whole other conversation. He warned me, and he passed away in 2013. But, I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get my CDL. I want to fulfill kind of a legacy there. And I got scared, because I knew, my grandfather, he had his first heart attack before I was born when he was 50, and he passed away due to chronic health issues that ended up catching up with him, where you're kind of, where your lifespan is continuing on, but you're not living those years kind of in tip-top shape. And, but my grandmother's still alive. His wife is still alive to this day. So, I mean, if he had lived a healthier lifestyle or was enabled in it, but he did drive for 30 plus years. But that's dive back into that in a moment. So I was scared. I knew, okay, I'd been building these habits. What's going to happen? I'm going to get in this truck. I'm going to figure it out. That's when I pick up the David Goggins book. And while I'm in CDL school is where I started to run. And running and you want to talk about starting over? I hadn't run intentionally in years. I probably hadn't run intentionally since, in at least the past 5 or 6 years from that point. So where running 2 miles would hurt. And, I had gone over the road, while I was over the road with my trainer, I started at PAM Transport. Since I read the Goggins book, it totally shifted my mindset of time. And so I knew that if all I could take was a 10-hour break, I had at least an allotted 2 hours that was dedicated to me, and I can fit 30 to 45 minutes into running. And really, that's where the journey into running took off. And when I tell people when it comes to weight loss, there's no shortcut. If there was a shortcut, it would already be the way. And it took me 6 years to eliminate 100 pounds. It didn't. Could I have done it quicker and more efficiently? Sure. Would it have been as sustainable? I don't know, because that's not the walk I kind of walked. But when it comes to that weight loss testimony, I mean, it's small goals daily. It's thinking 1% better every day. And that this isn't a shortcut. We have to think about the length of our life versus just, because everything's out there. Everything is lose this in 4 months, lose this in 6 months, 8-week program, do this, do that. Very overlooked. There's a lot of information out there that sells you this idea of quick results. And I think that Amazon and that stuff is to blame. We want our problems solved overnight because that's what we're used to.
I want
now.
my pizza in 30 minutes, Michael. I want my pizza in 30 minutes, or I want it free. I mean, that's our mentality. Yeah. That's it.
That's where we're at. But that's the weight loss testimony. I mean, when it comes to staying healthy over the road, it was a challenge. But I had to take a diagnostic of what I was going to do, and I was with my trainer for 2 weeks, and I figured out how it was going to be, what the lifestyle was going to look like. This is where tracking came into play. This is where I downloaded MyFitnessPal and realized I've got to know what I'm eating, just like you're balancing a budget. You cannot save money. If you're an owner-operator, you cannot run your business without knowing your cost per mile. You need to know how much you bring in. You need to know how much it costs to run your truck. There's no way around it. You can't know. You can't not know your costs and expect to make money. And it's the same thing with your diet. You need to know how much you make. You need to know how much you intake and how much you're outputting. And so that's when I started tracking, was with the trainer. I saw what the lifestyle was going to be like. I equipped myself with an air fryer, a food scale. I know it sounds pretty crazy, and people cringe whenever I talk about tracking, but it's not a means to an end, because at this point, I don't track anymore because I know what I'm eating, and I built these habits over time, found what I like that fits in, that's predominantly whole food meals that I've now tracked, and I kind of know the weights of things, so I know how many calories I'm taking. But I got the food scale, the microwave, the air fryer, had the fridge in the truck, and I knew from going with my trainer that you might not be able to park there every time, but you can pull into any Walmart. And if you're over the road, you've got to take 34-hour resets. There's Walmarts if you're route planning, you can plan out a 30-minute break. And I was that dialed to a T because I made it a priority. The priority was that on top. And because the priority of health and fitness was on top, the job still got done. I've never had a late appointment. I've never missed a delivery. I've never, overslept. I never had any issues.
Because you have the focus now. You have the focus now. I mean, that's it, right?
I had the focus, and I put it first to where, if you're just chasing the miles, if you're just chasing the money, eventually it will catch up to you. I say this a lot to drivers. You can do that. You can sacrifice your 20s, 30s, and into your 40s on ruining your sleep, running the miles, getting the money. You can do that. But when you're in the twilight of your life, your late 40s and your 50s, when your kids are grown, when they're getting married, graduating college, graduating high school, when you should be making the most amount of money of your career, when you should be eyeing retirement, that's when those health issues are going to catch up. And that's where you're going to have to you can't be on the road. You can't make money because you're going to doctor's appointments, you're on medication, you've risked your DOT physical. There's a lot, you can kick that can down the road and make that money, and you can sacrifice your body for decades. It will catch up to you when it's at the worst possible moments in the twilight of your career.
By the way, we are out of time, and you landed the plane gorgeously there. Michael, promise me when we don't have like I said, new platform, new world, new beginnings, when we don't have some of the issues we have, you're going to come back and join us again, because there is so much on the table yet to talk about, and also me convincing you to do a Tough Mudder with Dre and I. We'd like you to get involved with that. So promise me you'll come back.
Absolutely, yeah. If I could just leave you with one thing, I'm always down to hop back on. If parking's a huge issue out there, if drivers need some truck parking, they can contact me. Would love to talk to them about it. Download the Truck Parking Club app. Also, if you want to support this cause and this mission, I have a half Ironman in September, but you can go to project-61.org. Project 61 is a nonprofit dedicated to this issue. We've got a lot of big news and big stuff happening here in the near future with Project 61. I'm excited to talk about it. And if you're also looking to level up, again, I'm an open book. You can find me anywhere at Lombard Trucking. Give me a holler. I have the blueprint, the game plan to help you lock in exactly what I did over the road, some motivation. But those things right there, parking, I've been waving that banner for years. So if you need it and you don't want to get backed into, I can't speak highly enough about what we do at Truck Parking Club. And if you're looking to lock in, please, if you're in the trenches right now, I want to be the guy you call if you're in the trenches right now hurting, to give you my full support.
You can find him almost everywhere at Lombard Trucking, by the way. Michael Lombard has joined us this morning. Go have the safest and most healthiest of days over the course of the rest of the week. Thank you, Michael. We're going to be back. Oh, yeah, wait, once again, a little issue there. Appreciate you, Michael.